Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. We've got quite a bit to talk about in this midweek edition, including NASCAR addressing the loose wheel issues and what they believe are the reasons it's happening. A story this week that revealed the top Cup Series driver in merchandise sales through the first 2 months of the season, and it's not who you think it is. Why Carson Hocevar's merchandise is a really big mystery. Denny Hamlin's good luck going down in flames. Fox making a big change that hopefully will result in an improved broadcast in the very near future, and our By the Numbers segment, where we have our first official last 5 races analysis of the 2025 campaign. However, before we get to those numbers, I want to go back to yesterday morning and what I heard listening to Sirius XM NASCAR radio when Cup Series Managing Director Brad Moran made his weekly appearance. Unsurprisingly, a topic of discussion was the loose wheel issues we had in Las Vegas. Moran was also informed about Rodney Childers' remarks on Monday when he suggested there might be something going on with wheel weights. Here's what Moran had to say.
We've been discussing with the team. It's kind of odd that we saw, a couple in the past few weeks, and then possibly we saw 2 on the track. We certainly don't like it. It goes back a couple years to 2022, and when we were having some issues, but we worked together as an industry, and we got on top of that. And for whatever reason, it appears that we've got something going on. I've been discussing it with a lot of the crew chiefs and managers. And I wouldn't so quickly say it was wheel weight. We do know that did happen on one occasion, but again, I think it's about time as well, and timing, and trying to get as much done as you can, and in the shortest period of time. And again, you push it to the limit, and unfortunately, if that car hits the ground before that nut's tight, we've had this problem.
He talks about timing and teams pushing it to the limit. That's what Jeff Cordero, the front tire changer for 2-time Daytona 500 winner William Byron, told me on Monday. Pit crews know the importance of track position, and every thousandth of a second matters. They're trying to find any advantage, and mistakes were made. I'm going to keep an eye on this, but I bet going forward this weekend at Homestead and beyond, the pit crews clean up those mistakes. Moving on to our next story, and it's one I wrote about yesterday on Athlon, about the top Cup Series driver in merchandise sales 2 months into the 2025 season. It's not even a Cup Series driver. Adam Stern wrote a story in the Sports Business Journal this week about how Traveler Whiskey wants to continue advertising to the NASCAR fan base after receiving a strong return on its investment in the season-opening Daytona 500, where it sponsored Justin Allgaier. And in that article, according to Junior Motorsports, the Xfinity Series driver, who won the most popular driver award for the second-tier series 5 of the last 6 seasons, is currently the #1 Cup Series driver in merchandise sales. Pretty impressive stuff. Also in the article, Traveler's diecast model car sales with Lionel are projected to be in the top 5 for this year. The power of the Earnhardt brand is strong, and honestly, after last year's merchandise numbers, this really shouldn't come as a surprise. Dale Earnhardt was number 9 in sales, while Dale Jr. was 11. Speaking of merchandise sales, here's a weird one, and it was something I was tipped off about yesterday by my fellow coworker at Athlon, Justin Schuler. The NASCAR store is one of the places where they calculate merchandise sales, that and at the track. But the NASCAR store doesn't have any Carson Hocevar merchandise available. I mean, anywhere. Go check it out yourself. Type in Carson, and the only thing that appears is for Carson Quapple. Very, very strange. I reached out to NASCAR and haven't heard back, but thought it was very odd and worth mentioning. Our next story is somewhat of a follow-up on what I talked about in Monday's video about Denny Hamlin hitting it big in Las Vegas on the slots. He was having all the luck and said this about it on his Monday Actions Detrimental podcast.
So I went to a different machine, and I put a quarter in, I win a car. I put a quarter in, I win a car. That's basically how it went. Every 5-10 minutes, it was just a new pay. So that's what we did. It was a lot of fun.
On Tuesday, it appeared that the Joe Gibbs Racing driver's luck had run out. He revealed as much when he shared videos on Instagram of his yard engulfed in flames. He indicated it was caused by the lawnmower catching on fire. And this story has a bit of irony. That's because later in the day, the number 11 driver had a sponsor reveal. Who was it? Progressive Insurance. Seriously, you can't make this stuff up. Honestly, it's really nice to see a big name coming into the sport, and they aren't just dipping their toes in the water. The company will be on the car for 18 races starting this weekend at Homestead. And our final story before our By the Number segment is also somewhat of a follow-up to one of my main stories in Monday's video. For the first time this season, I talked about the Fox broadcast and the mistakes it was making, specifically a couple of blunders made at the end of the telecast by Mike Joy and Chris Myers. But for those of you who have followed my channel for a while now, you know that I have blasted Fox's abysmal NASCAR coverage for years, like the cameras constantly zooming in too close on the cars and those tight angles often missing action happening on the track. Or even worse, and something else that has become commonplace during Fox's coverage, not showing whatever is being described by the announcers in the broadcast booth. All of these things are the responsibility of the director. And the director of Fox's NASCAR coverage for years has been Artie Kempner. So you can only imagine my reaction on Monday night, just hours after putting out my video, when I saw this post on X from The Athletic saying that Kempner is gone from Fox. ESPN has hired him to work with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman on Monday Night Football to, according to this story, elevate the presentation of the product. But there was something in this story that I thought was worth mentioning, and it's this. Burke Magnus, who is ESPN's president of content, who was quoted in the story, said that he met Kempner in December at the Broadcasting and Cable Hall of Fame. The two had never met before. Quote, "As I was leaving, he introduced himself to me, and we got to talking a little bit, and I came to understand he was going to be available in the coming months." So based on that comment, after 3 decades at Fox, the network was parting ways with Kempner. Only speculating, but guess like all of us, the network had seen enough of the missed shots of the racing action or the kid shots in the stands. Now that Kempner is out, we can only hope that this results in an improvement to Fox's coverage, and hopefully sooner rather than later. I'll definitely be keeping an eye on this one in the coming weeks. All right, and now it's time for this week's By the Number segment. And finally, after 5 races under our belt in 2025, the return of our last 5 races analysis. However, before I do that, I want to take a look at the race progression graphs put together by my buddy, Joel Steuben. Again, these can all be found on stube.com. I love these graphs because, as we all know, how a driver finishes is one thing, and it's obviously very important, but it's not necessarily reflective of the overall performance on the day. A late wreck can ruin what was a good day. These graphs provide clarification and show you just where a car was running throughout the race. Our first one is a great example. Kyle Busch started 4th, and it was pretty much all downhill, or in the case of this graph, uphill from there. Austin Dillon started mid-pack and finished 1 spot ahead of his teammate. I think this one from RFK is pretty interesting because you can see how team co-owner Brad Keselowski improved throughout the day. Chris Buescher had a day, but look at Ryan Preece. Started 12th, dropped back, but made his way forward and ended with his career best finish. Up next are the boys at Team Penske and Wood Brothers. Ryan Blaney had a wild up and down day, as did Austin Cindric, going in pretty much the opposite direction. But take a look at the number 21 car. Steady, was in the top 10 in both stages, and then when it mattered most, made his way to the front and captured his first career Cup win. And our final 2 graphs are with the 2 powerhouse organizations in Joe Gibbs Racing and Hendrick Motorsports. The JGR boys had a rough day. Take a look at that, and you can see the highest any driver finished during a stage was 10th by Christopher Bell in that first stage. Of note, Chase Briscoe rebounded after the early loose wheel and penalty, but none of them finished inside the top 10. Then you look at the HMS camp. Quite the opposite throughout the day in Vegas. The worst stage finish was Alex Bowman in stage 2 at 18th, and all of them finished inside the top 10. Just an interesting look at how a driver and team collectively performs throughout the race. I'll be including this in future By the Numbers segments. And finally, it's time for our last 5 races analysis. Starting at the top, William Byron is the leader with an 8 even average finishing position with his 3 top 5 results at Daytona, COTA, and Las Vegas. His lone blemish, the 27th at Atlanta. He's followed up by the driver I thought would have been at the top in Christopher Bell. But as you can see, Bell's 9.2 AFP is a result of him sandwiching his 3 consecutive wins with a 31st place at Daytona and his 12th place last week in Sin City. You can tell our top 10 is somewhat mirroring that last graph I showed on HMS. Alex Bowman comes in at number 3 with an average finishing position of 11.0, with 4 top 10s, and is followed by his HMS teammate Chase Elliott, who has an AFP of 11.8, with 3 top 10s. But notice all of his finishes are inside the top 20, much like he did last year. Chris Buescher comes in at 5th at 13 even with 3 top 10s of his own. A 5th place at Phoenix, his best result. Rounding out the top 10 are Kyle Larson, Tyler Reddick, and the biggest surprise, John Hunter Nemechek, followed by Ross Chastain and Denny Hamlin. Others of note are Brad Keselowski, who is 31st overall with an average finishing position of 24.8, with 3 of his 5 finishes 25th or worse. And lastly, we'll look at Ty Gibbs, who was in just the opposite position last year, running up near the top. This year, the number 54 driver has started off the season's first 5 races with an AFP of 25.8 and is 34th overall after not recording a single top 15. His best result was 16th at the Daytona 500. All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode. We've covered a lot, and I want to hear what you think. First, what do you think about the NASCAR merchandise sales and Justin Allgaier being the top Cup Series driver after only running the 500? Were you one of the purchasers of his merch? And I'm curious to hear your thoughts and ideas on why Carson Hocevar's merchandise can't be found anywhere on NASCAR's store. Weird stuff. And what do you think about the big news that Artie Kempner will no longer be in charge of directing Fox's NASCAR coverage? Do you expect improvements immediately, or will it be a little later down the road? And finally, I want to hear what you have to say about our By the Numbers segment, including our race progression graphs and the last 5 races analysis. Any surprises in there for you? Remember, go check out all those numbers and more at stube.com. Thanks again for checking out the latest video and supporting the channel. I really and truly appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your day.